All right, time now for Breaking It Down, where we go in depth on the big stories in this country. And tomorrow, a bipartisan commission takes up the task of investigating our country's financial crisis. Big bank CEOs like Lloyd Blankfein, Jamie Dimon, John Mack are set to testify in the first day of hearings led by former California State Treasurer, Democrat Phil Angelides, and former House Ways and Means Chairman, Republican Bill Thomas. Their mission? Taking a magnifying glass to the collapse, identifying the key players, and asking why. But before we can ask why, we must also know what happened. We're breaking it down.
Flashback more than a decade. With the new millennium approaching, the internet suddenly made almost everything, including the financial markets, much more transparent and available to everybody. Great news for the common man, who had never before enjoyed access to the same information traders had.
E-Trade. Get 24-hour online news, quotes, and analysis free, and pay only $14.95 per trade.
But bad news for the old Wall Street titans lock on the game. And that meant those titans needed a game changer to keep making the big dollars. On November 12, 1999, they got the first of their wishes. A piece of legislation passed by a Republican Congress and signed by President Bill Clinton repealed the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933. Commercial banks, the places you save your money for a rainy day, were given the power to move into the investment and insurance industries and allowed to use access to your money to back their risk-taking ventures. Next, Wall Street invented a secretive new product only they could sell, a product kept far from the bright lights of the newly transparent markets. It's called a credit derivative. That's when banks buy and sell the risk of whether you'll default on your loan. Think of it as a giant gambling parlor where bankers bet each other on how many people will be able to pay their bills. This secretive market soon accounted for a majority of bank profits in many cases. It's betting that would have been illegal, but for a law passed in 2000 called the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. This left no one with regulatory oversight of a multi-trillion-dollar time bomb. Not securities, not insurance, not even gaming regulators. And then, to top it all off, leading bankers pleaded with the SEC to change its rules and allow them to start lending as much as $4,000 for every $100 of your money they kept on deposit. And in 2004, the SEC acquiesced. What followed?
It's not just here on the beach, where home buyers are scoring big returns.
The housing and derivative markets boom, CEO compensation explodes, and everyone's happy.
Happy days are here again.
That is, until it all came crashing down.
Good afternoon, everybody. We have a problem.
Here on the floor watching this market deteriorate.
Here's why. Politicians tried to put every American in the house of their dreams. Meantime, Wall Street desperately needed a new moneymaker in the face of technology crushing the profitability of their old businesses. Wall Street and the government set up a system that had taxpayers on the hook for their bad bets on whether people could pay their bills. But when people couldn't pay them, it revealed Wall Street's empty pockets. Enter the U.S. government, which swooped in last year with $23 trillion of taxpayer money. They appeared to save the day and bring the market back from the brink. A relief for fearful Americans and politicians, and a record windfall for banks. Which leads us to 2009, a banner year for some of the very institutions that brought the system to its knees. They grabbed the government giveaway and took it right back to their secret markets. 92% of those at the top still have their jobs. These executives are not only looking at a potential record year for profits, but a record year for bonuses. Will Goldman Sachs alone pay out $23 billion? Will J.P. Morgan hand out $500,000 per head? Stay tuned. The checks start rolling out next week.
Well, bankers say it was all a sad accident. Others call it the biggest theft and cover-up in financial history. Now, it's up to this Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission to decide who to believe and who you ought to believe. Joining us now is Eliot Spitzer, former governor and attorney general of the state of New York and managing editor of the Financial Times. Not Eliot Spitzer. You can only do so much.
My specialty.
Christian Freeland, Nice to see you. You published earlier today on the Huffington Post, and I guess there's a new deal, 2.0?
That's correct.
From the Roosevelt
Institute. That's correct.
Understood. A list of 10 questions that ought to be asked of these bank CEOs when they testify. Correct. I want to highlight 4 of them and ask you why they're so important. I've got, you say, ask the bankers, do they think AIG's credit derivative strategy was good business? Why is that such an important question?
Well, first of all, we need to understand, was this a business model that was fundamentally broken, or was this just a business model that was designed at the beginning to make money and spiraled out of control, or was it something that was in essence criminal because they were selling these credit default swaps with no collateral, and inevitably it was going to collapse and somebody would be left holding the bag, and that was us. In other words, was it good business, bad business, corrupt, or just a big mistake?
Ask the bankers total compensation to officers since 2001, and what did they do to deserve it?
Wait, separate questions. One, we need to get order of magnitude. How much money has been taken out of the system by these individuals who created the system that cratered? And second, what they did to deserve it. This is more the philosophical question. What does anybody do on Wall Street to merit $70 million? Now, my answer would be nothing. I don't think you can justify that. That's a personal perspective, but I think we need to get them on the record. What do you do to deserve these 7- 8-figure salaries?
Christian, go ahead. Yeah, please.
When you say you can't deserve $70 million, is that a moral judgment, an economic judgment?
It's a philosophical, it's a political, it's a social contract judgment that somebody who was trading money back and forth doesn't deserve it. They didn't save lives. They did not create the computer chip.
What about the hedge fund manager who just places lots of great bets and makes $1 billion in a year? Should that be illegal?
Look, no, illegal and deserve are very different things. It's not illegal, but if it's being paid for by taxpayer money, then it's a very different matter. If this is a private consensual relationship between investors and a hedge fund manager, and they all agree, and there are no consequences to the larger polity, we can tax it, we can do other things, but that's a separate matter.
So John Paulson is okay, Lloyd Blankfein not so okay?
Well, this year, no. When we have bailed them out, the answer is no, and when they create systemic risk, which we then have to cover, then it's no good, and that is why this is not purely a private transaction.
Let's move along. We'll come back, though. I think that's a great conversation we can do a whole nother breaking it down on compensation, quite honestly. What is it? How does pay get allocated? Investor, innovator, or is it just whatever the government lets you do? You say ask the bankers, how much have your bank spent on lobbying over the past 5 years? You also, at a different question, say, how much did you lobby, or did you lobby, I guess it was, to pass the Commodity Futures Modernization Act we referenced in the piece?
I think, again, we need to understand, did these banks use their enormous political sway to craft the political and economic and legal environment which then created this cataclysm? And this is partly a question of understanding fault and holding people accountable, partly understanding the politics of what happened, and partly saying to them, why are we now bailing you out and letting you take bonuses again when you created the very environment which led to this disaster?
Which I think is everybody is asking that exact question to themselves. Last one from your list, and again, we'll put the rest of it up on the web. It's on the Huffington Post. It's on the web as we speak. You say, ask the bankers, how did you respond to FBI warnings in 2004 about a possible mortgage crisis? How many criminal referrals has your bank made, for mortgage fraud cases? Did your bank lobby in support of deregulatory efforts that contributed to the crisis?
Right here, I think there's an important point. Back in 2004, people were beginning to say this system is out of control. There is fraud afoot in the marketing and sales of these mortgages that then led to the collapse. Part of the responsibility is the borrower. Part of it was clearly the marketing and the financing and the credit rating agencies, et cetera. Once they were put on notice that there was a major problem, did they do anything to rein things in? And again, this goes back to the moral sense of culpability. If they knew there was this crisis brewing and they were cashing in without putting brakes on, then there's a sense that, hey, you guys really did act in an irresponsible manner, even if we can't say this particular mortgage was fraudulent. They knew that there was a system that was creating this systemic risk and risk for everybody.
Understood. Thank you very much. To recap, 3 ways we will all know our administration, our government is serious, and not only about getting to the heart of the problems in our financial community, but making serious changes to restructure it. As I said at the top, increased transparency on the credit markets, revelation of AIG emails, you pick it. We have to have transparency if we're going to have markets we can deal with and trust. 2, outlaw gambling with other people's money. Any way you do it, it should be illegal. And 3, get rid of too big to fail. If they do that, go ahead, please.
Can I add a 4th one,
please
Dylan, which is a little bit less welcome because it concerns us, not just people on Wall Street. Tighter rules on mortgage lending. If you look at Canada, which has much tighter actual legislation about mortgage lending, you didn't have the banks meltdown.
Yeah, totally agree. I couldn't agree more. Add as many as you want. Just ahead, busted.